begin? We're all looking for the promised land. And in the end, we just need someone to hold our hands. Everybody needs some kind of refuge, something to run to, someone who loves you. I'll be the light guiding you through the night when the stars just refuse to shine. And I'll be your shelter, that safe place to hide, your sanctuary.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Everybody's Addicted. This is episode 4, and today we have Prue with us. She is going to share her story about the addiction that her mother had and how it affected her. She herself is not an addict, but she has survived being kind of a person that has been heavily affected by it. So I'm gonna hand it off to her and she's gonna tell us what has happened in her life. So thank you for sharing your story and yeah, go ahead.
And thanks for having me. I appreciate that. So, my mother, who's no longer here, rest in peace, mom, she struggled with lifelong addiction and mental health as well. It started before I was born, when she was working in the medical field and having my older sisters as well. So, what precipitated it was pretty much a lot of trauma, childhood trauma. She was a sexual violence survivor. On top of that, any guy she was with was always ended up with her getting beaten by them. So domestic violence, she knew all too well. And unfortunately, back in the day, my family, my mom's side of the family, didn't want to deal with it and just hush hush, swept beneath the rug. So my mom was a traumatized individual, and a lot of times was a single parent because of the men she unfortunately ended up being with. Um, and it snowballed. When she was in the medical field. It started with her taking my great grandparents' T3s and Percocets because she also had some physical health issues that she needed pain management for. And then going to the hospital, they doped her up in a lot of narcotics. How the opiate crisis began, my mom was one of those. The Oxycontin and all this fun stuff. So then, but she kept it under control and hidden. I was born, and the first few years that I can remember, up until the age of 7, she had it hidden under control. She was still providing for us, being a single mom and various boyfriends, but she had it together for the most part up until the age of 7, where she started abusing more heavy substances.
You know why?
And
It's because like the actual opiates are so
yeah,
expensive, right? That the
right.
other stuff's cheaper, and that's why a lot of people, I myself even had gone to other things because it's cheaper and
Yeah,
like actual oxy is so much more expensive than buying fentanyl, right? So
yeah,
I can understand why she did that, but I know
right.
it leads to a dark path anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, it does. It most certainly does. With her, it sure did. So, she owned her house at the time, and unfortunately, due to her addiction, her money problems started happening. And it was just getting progressively worse to the point where there was an incident where she had to foreclose on her house with she had her mortgage at the time with TD Bank, and TD Bank foreclosed the house. So she lost the house that she owned. She never owned a house again. So when she lost the house, that really hurt her, but her addiction was just going
That
strong.
adds more trauma, right? So then it's another
Yeah,
thing to numb yourself from, right?
exactly. And like unresolved trauma, because like even in the early 2000s when this was going on, right? Like the support was virtually non-existent, and my mom's side of family just couldn't be bothered to help her. They just judged her and demonized her and used everything they could to not associate with her. So she was really on her own with her own trauma and then physical health, like um, degenerative disc disease, a leaky heart valve after I was born, stuff like that. So she ended up stopped working in the medical field and went on ODSP. So, and she had 5 kids altogether, me included. So when she lost that house, then she started becoming a renter. She ended up being a renter for the rest of her life. And then it was just one thing after another over the years. The addiction got so bad, she got caught up with melting opiates and using needles, smoking
God.
crack, doing cocaine, heroin, drinking very excessively with alcohol, prostituting to make that extra coin, right? So it ended up being the point where we were dangerously below the poverty line. She got evicted so many times. I ended up at emergency shelters with her.
That
Um,
must have been hard.
it was. But she did try and try and try, but it snowballed to where in 2007, February of that year, the Catholic Show Aid Society of Hamilton, because we were living in Hamilton at the time, came in and apprehended my older sister's baby first, who I was actually taking care of for the first 9 months of his life because my mom was either high or dope sick. The mother of the sister was always high and dope sick as well. Mom's boyfriend was no longer around. The oldest sister moved out a long time ago. The other older sister moved out previously as well. So it's just me and my brother and my mom. So I took care of this baby for the first 9 months of his life. Almost got kicked out of school because of that. And the house was always dirty. No, the utilities were being switched on and off. My mom's phone was being switched on and off. Barely any food in the house. So it got to a point where CAS apprehended the baby first, and then 2 days later, because my mom was so dope sick, right, and there was no access for her, what she was using at the time, it created a lot of stress in her body. So she had an aneurysm. So she had a stroke right in front of me. And as we were supposed to be watching a movie together that day, and that ended up with me being 6 hours, me not knowing what to do because I was 11 years old at the time, and trying to snap my mom out of it and doing everything I can to get a response out of her. And she was just looking at me with vacant eyes. She was not there. It was stroked. 6 hours later, the one sister that was still at the house comes home, high as a kite, picked me up, threw me against the TV cabinet, yelled at me to go upstairs, and then she got unable to call 911. And that's when we figured out, and that's when CAS took me and my brother for foster care. Ended up, my mom tried fighting it to get us back, didn't work. Ended up being a crown ward of the society, so the government became my legal guardians. And then for the first 3.5 years after I became a crown ward, my mom vanished out of my life because she was just so devastated, and she just went completely downhill for like 3.5 years with the drugs, with the addiction. Meanwhile, I'm in foster care and I'm going through this and I'm going through that. And the supervised visits I had with my mom was the only thing that I looked forward to at the time and kept me going because I get to see my mom, all this fun stuff. And yeah. And then 3.5 years later, after that, she comes back into my life, sober, clean at the time. She started doing drug tests with CAS for the supervised visits. So, and by the time she came back around, I was a teenager. I was like 15 years old. I was happy to have my mom back in my life. I was mad at her initially, but thank God I had a therapist at the time for child abuse. And eventually, we brought my mom in for counseling sessions, and that actually healed my mom and I quite nicely. And I was always close to her. I was always a mama's kid. So I was able to get back to that kind of relationship with her after the counseling, which was beautiful. And then we just started having a working relationship as I got older. Her other kids wanted nothing to do with her. Her own mom didn't want anything to do with her. Her siblings didn't want anything to do with her. So at the end of the day, she really only had myself. And to the point where like I became the executor of her estate, her next of kin, um, everything that legally and medically came down to it. I was That was me. Dealt with that. She started using again. and she just couldn't stay clean this time. So she let me know. She didn't shield me from anything, and I had my Narcan kits on the go, ready to go in, and in case something happens.
Yeah.
Um, and right, I can get there in a hurry. I was her non-residential caregiver as well. I tried to get her to move in with me, because that would have been a lot better option, but she still didn't want to give up the independence of living alone.
Yeah,
So
because
we
I lived
fought on
with
that.
my dad when he had cancer, and I had the same thing. I'm an only child, so
Yeah,
I was in charge of everything. I mean, he was an alcoholic, but he had quit because he had severe cancer and stuff like that. So I know what it's
right.
like to have to deal with that. But he lived with me. I couldn't imagine the worry you must have felt not like being with her all the time because you just
Oh yeah,
don't know what could happen, right?
exactly. And I didn't know what would happen. My mom, unfortunately, because of her issues, was a wild card. Um, but yeah, we made it work, and I was there for her. She didn't hide anything from me, and I rushed her to the hospital so many times. Even with blood pouring out of her mouth, her nose, her ears, other orifices, because there was a really bad thing with her heart, her open heart surgery that she shouldn't have survived, back in July of 24, yeah, July of 2014, but she did because she was also a fighter when it came to stuff like that. So she was having issues with that, and so many times I rushed her to the hospital. She needed me, I was there. I actually kept her going, and kept her trying and trying.
I relate
Um,
to that so much because, like, my dad, same thing. He had septic shock. They kept telling me to pull the plug. I refused to pull the plug. He came back, and I relate to that so much, right? And I get the fear and living at the hospital pretty much because there's so much health issues going on,
yeah,
and it's highly stressful. And you
yep.
look a lot younger than me, so I can only
I'm
imagine, like,
29.
yeah, like I'm 37, so like going through that at that age and having
Yeah,
that responsibility on top of everything else going on, like that
yeah.
is a lot. And you must be a very empathetic person to be able to have handled all of that. Like,
Always, always. Always been an empathetic person ever since I was a child. That was one thing. And my mom didn't even have to instill that in me. It just came to me naturally as a kid. It was so funny. But I've always been an empathetic person. And like in dealing with that, and like because she was an addict, right? She would get like judged by nurses and mistreated at hospitals.
mm,
Me and nurses, especially at the Helms in general, a lot of times, the charge nurse, the head doctor, we would argue right there, because I was also her advocate, right? Like, no, 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 no. And I knew what was up, and I knew everything, and I had the paperwork this and paperwork that. I was like, no, this is not her being an addict. This is her being in pain. Like, we're
like,
not doing this today.
oh
Like,
yeah, I know. I've had nurses be like, "You need to pull the plug. You need to pull the plug."
yeah,
And I remember actually this one nurse, she was so like she was a bit younger and she was very into her look. So she had like her hair done and her makeup and her nails and
right.
everything. And we're in the ICU too, so I don't understand that. But she told me to pull the plug and told me my dad was never going to come back, and then sat there all night talking about her boyfriend. And then in the morning said, "You need to bring your family in. Your dad's going." And then the doctor came in and said, "He's actually turning around and doing better." So if I would have
Yeah.
listened to her, he wouldn't have lived for another almost a year, you know? So,
Me?
like, the people, like, you have to fight with them because they judge, you know what I mean? And
Oh yeah.
they don't know exactly like if somebody's going to be okay or not. So it's not really right to be pushing
Yep.
such things and also being so judgmental. Like, I know exactly how that is too because I was sick once, and I had an oxy addiction at one point also. And because I had oxy in my system, they treated me totally different after they found that in my system
Yep.
and thought that I was in withdrawal. And it wasn't withdrawal. I had a huge, really bad
Yeah.
stomach flu, right?
Yep.
And yeah, they just don't treat you the same because they think that, oh, you're just an addict and, you know, it's Brantford too, right? So they just really don't
Right.
care.
It's like, yeah, no, 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 that shouldn't be a thing. So
Mm,
yeah,
they're not
I hate
supposed
when that
to.
happens. Yeah. So then, like, but like, as much as I was there for her, she was also there for me as much as she could. Like I had a few ex-partners, and I went through a lot of domestic violence. And if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have made it out of one particular relationship because I would call, ask her for help, and she would, once the line went dead because my phone was being smashed by my ex, she would just race to my house, break down my front door, and physically get him off me, and
Yeah.
get me out of there to the hospital to safety, what have you, right? So there were like she did do whatever she could for me
Well,
as well, but she had limitations because
it's a hard, like a rock in a hard place because
yeah,
my mom has childhood trauma too, right? So like
right,
the things that she sometimes does, I forgive because I understand where her trauma is.
right,
And like she drinks, but she hides it. But I mean,
yep,
I understand that it's just to cope with some of the crazy things that have happened to her. And it's hard because, you know, you want them to be okay and you like
yeah,
you're going through all this. Like I definitely didn't go through nearly as much as you have with your mother, but it's like you understand that they have that trauma and it's
yeah,
not healed. So you like
yeah,
you kind of understand them, so it's a little bit easier to not hate them for what they're
yeah,
doing. You know what I mean? Like I know a lot of people
definitely.
don't think that way, but you got to think of them as a person and you got to think of their
Yep.
trauma. Even though they're causing you trauma, it's not their fault because they don't know any better, right?
Exactly. And that's why I try to tell especially my brother, a lot over the years, and he just didn't get it. And I've told people that. And like towards the end too, like the last couple of years, like her mental health took a real decline, sharp decline with her addiction too. So her and I started fighting so much more than we ever did. And I still stuck around. Like I took her like a break from her, if you will,
Mm.
right? And of course, I said things privately to my friends, and I shouldn't have said, but I was so angry.
Oh, I've done that.
Because, right. So, but I was still there for her, right? And then at the end, I went away on vacation, just as towards the end of July of 2020. So at the height of the pandemic, I went away on vacation 8 hours up north with friends of mine. And this vacation changed everything because there was an incident that was going on with my mother that she hid from me. It was the only time she hid from me. And it was an incident where her life was at risk because certain people around her, I'm just not going to mention who or any identifiers, but wanted her dead.
Yeah.
And if I found out, or if my mom broke free out of her apartment because they kept her locked up in her apartment, and I didn't know that when I went to go check on her, she was a good actor, and obviously there was something going on where she had to like play it off, and I bought it because she's was very good at it.
They say that
Um,
about addicts. They are the best flyers and actors.
yeah,
Like they could win Oscars because they're just so good
yeah,
at it. So that's the
right.
thing, right?
And like I should have picked up on in hindsight, I should have picked up on a few things, but I didn't. So I went on vacation though. When I was away, my mom actually got out and tried to get to my house, knowing that if she banged on my door, I let her in, obviously, and she told me what was going on. What was going on would have stopped immediately, and these people would be done, right? And she would actually still be here today. But I was 8 hours away. She tried to get to my house. She was being watched by certain people. So, and they caught her and forced her back into her apartment. I didn't know about this till after. They also
Hmm.
took her phone from her. And then if I was calling her, they'd be like, "You better," and then just give the phone to her. So she actually, and she was fearful. So her last few days, especially, was fear. She was living in fear, and I didn't know this. I was just on my way back, heading back from this 8 hour vacation, and they got what they wanted, and my mom died in her own home on the couch in the living room. Um, and I was just getting back into Hamilton, and it was just I had to move my brother too, so I was get back in Hamilton, move my brother, started moving my brother, not realizing what was going on. They cleaned up the apartment. All of my mom's health and legal paperwork was always out in the open on the coffee table in case something did happen at her place, right? So when authorities showed up, they will see it, read it, and then my phone will go off, right? Immediately, right? Call me.
Yeah.
All that paperwork was conveniently thrown out. The scene was cleaned up, and they made it look natural. And for 8 hours until the coroner showed up, my mom was alone, dead on her couch, and I had no idea.
That is
I
so
found out,
sad. That is so
right.
sad.
I found out through a social media grapevine, and then my sister's dad.
That is,
And I was doing the last moving load of with my brother to his new place, and I almost passed out behind the steering wheel. But then I felt an energy come into my car, and I felt my mother, and I felt this strength come out of nowhere. Like, no, you need to drive to your brother's new place before this, right?
mm,
So I get in. I told my brother what's going on. He starts screaming, yelling at me. I'm already driving, right? I'm like, call our oldest sister, get a hold of mom's sister. I'm driving to your new place. Shush. And he's like, how long has she been dead? Apparently 12 hours. And he's like, your phone didn't go off? And I was like, well, obviously something happened. And obviously someone is at fault. Because
yeah,
my mom was very careful. So she died of fentanyl. But even with a fentanyl overdose, what was in her system, she couldn't have done it herself.
yeah.
And then
It's like,
confessions came out. Then confessions came out a bit
yeah,
later. Yep.
that's sad.
Yep.
It's just such a shock to the system. Like with me, like I was prepared for what was going to happen because it
Yeah.
was like obviously like doctors had said like this is it, like you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yep.
But like for you, like oh my God, and then just the way that it happened and everything, that's so scary. And like
It is.
you're
And like
this
I had
isn't the, you're not the first person I've talked to. Somebody I just talked to on another podcast said that they were kidnapped because
oh,
of the same kind of like
lovely.
issues with drugs and stuff, right?
Right.
So it's like it's more that threat is more real than you think. You know what
It
I
is.
mean? And
It
like
absolutely is.
you don't think it like in your mind that that's like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like you said, you didn't really think about it, but like it really is such a threat. And I
Yep.
mean, I just feel so like I don't even have words. I feel so bad for you for just having just the way it all went down, like
It
especially
all went
because
down.
you
And
were
no
close
final,
and you didn't get to say
yeah,
goodbye, nothing.
none of
Like,
that. And get this, they left a burner number with a fake name for the police. And the police gave that to the coroner because all the paperwork was gone. So the police had no idea about me or the coroner. So after everything was set up on my brother's new place, I drove to my mom's apartment. Certain people were in there, and I was like, if you don't leave now, I'm gonna physically haul your ass out. Oh, I'll call the police. And I'm like, oh, go right ahead because something happened here,
yeah.
and it won't be me going in the cruiser. I will physically drag you out of here and throw you onto Barton Street. Get the hell out of my mom's place because now legally that's my place.
Oh, and if it's
I'm like,
Barton
get out.
Street, yeah, Barton
Yeah,
Street. Oh, I don't trust that street for nothing.
right. So I was like, and
No.
legally that her apartment became mine the second she died. So I was like, get out.
Yeah.
Right. So and then I went back. So I dealt with that. And then I went back to my house. I stayed up all night and did not sleep because my mom's body's gone. I have to take custody of my mom's body. Like all the paperwork is gone. When I went in there, I was like, just that's not add up. I'm like, mom didn't overdose herself because she was too smart and too careful when it came to the fentanyl, the car fentanyl, and the fact that all the legal and medical paperwork was gone. I, like out of the entire
If the
apartment,
medical
that
paperwork's
would let
gone
me know.
and she'd been an addict for that long, she wouldn't have like overdosed herself
Yeah,
at all. Like my
exactly.
ex, like my daughter's father, he's been a fentanyl addict for like 8 years now. There's no way
Yeah,
he would overdose himself,
exactly.
right? And the
Exactly.
fact that the paperwork's gone, like why is the paperwork gone? That makes like
That would
that's
have alerted
so
me.
fishy.
Right. And they called 911, using a fake name and whatever, and then just dipped, literally just dipped before the cops even arrived. So when the cops arrived, my mom was dead and no one was there. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, great. So like I knew something was up because the police would have got there and I would have got a call like that and I would have been like, well, change of plans,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, but if I didn't go on that vacation, something tells me I could have saved her. I could have saw her trying to get to my place and I could have got her because I was always driving by her house because if we
Yeah.
lived roughly in that same area, because I made sure of that just in case. So, yeah. And then, so I stayed up all night that night. I called every single hospital in Morgan, this across in Ontario, Southern, Northern, Eastern, Western, Central, at the Gordon Horseshoe,
Trying to find
everywhere,
her.
trying to find her. And then I actually got a hold of the coroner, Dr. Judy Baird. And I left her a voicemail at first, and then 5 minutes later, she called me back, and she's like, and I introduced myself to her on the phone, and I told her why I was calling because I didn't explain in my voicemail because I'm like, just call me now, right? And she's like, do you have paperwork? And I'm like, yeah, because I have also my digital copies because I was always smart like that.
I do the
So, and
same thing.
she's like, well, I've been trying to get someone to take custody of his body, and that's a fake name and a burner number. And I was about to declare your mom an unclaimed case, which would have taken you 2 to 3 weeks of going through circuits of mazes to even take custody of her body.
It's
And she couldn't proceed
heartbreaking.
with the autopsy without authorization, my authorization. So I
That's like
lost my mom.
heartbreaking. And it's like that's obviously something fishy because like when my
Yep,
sister-in-law's husband died, the coroner called her right away. Like right
yep,
away. So
yep.
like that in itself, like obviously
Coroner,
there's like it doesn't
yeah,
add up and
it
for
doesn't.
you in that like how
Yep.
did you deal with trying to find her body? Like that
I
must
stayed
have
up all
been
night calling, and I had friends come over to
oh
my house. Drive. I had friends from all over Hamilton. I had friends in Brantford come down. I had friends in Toronto come down like throughout the night. Like I had people coming in force for me, right? Being like, okay, we're here, and I'm just in the middle of crying and breaking down and trying to find my mom's body, right? But I
yeah.
found it then the next morning, just before I went to the retirement home where my mom's being kept at, to tell her that her oldest daughter is dead. She already lost her youngest daughter back in the 80s, 3 months, because the youngest, was born with a hole in her heart, and now she just lost her oldest, my mom. So I was dealing with all that, and
That's a lot.
I instructed Dr. Baird. I was like, do the autopsy now. I want custody of my mom's body, and I want her transported to this funeral home within the next 48 to 72 hours. There is a funeral, and I want my mom's body in my custody now. So let's go. She's like, perfect, thank you.
They
And
give you the money that they're
autopsy,
supposed to give you, like the government's supposed to give you like $3,000 towards like that.
yeah, they
Too.
didn't give me all that much. So I drained my savings for everything. I gave her a proper funeral,
Oh,
open casket, a proper burial. At least my mom's family, her stepdad, the one she called dad, so where he's buried and her youngest sister is buried, it's a triplot. So three
yeah,
casket and six adult size urns. So I'm still grateful and surprised that my mom's side of family didn't fight me on this final wish of her and granted it to me. And I'm like, okay, thank you. That was too easy, but thanks. So I did that. I paid for everything, the obituary, the funeral, the grave marker, getting her to where she really wanted to go. After the funeral, I had her cremated for the burial. That took a week later. I did everything. I bought her new clothes, new jewelry, because being an addict, it's like I wanted to make her presentable, and have her dignity, right? Because considering what happened, how she was, I wanted her dignity, and I wanted the last time I saw my mom's face, to be what she always wanted to look like, but couldn't. So I did that for her.
yeah. I think
And
that's
I drained my
beautiful.
savings.
That's beautiful. I love that's beautiful because like my dad was cremated right away from the hospital. So the last time
Yeah,
I seen him, he was like 100 pounds and looked horrible, right? So
yeah,
that's beautiful because you have that. I
yeah,
wish I had done that, like listening to you because
yeah,
I like think about that. I think about
yeah,
walking away from his body, and that's like the last time I ever was
yeah.
gonna see him, and that's how he looked.
Yep.
Whereas, like, at least you were like more logical, maybe, and
Oh,
was
I made
like,
sure of
I
it.
want to make her look like
Yep.
beautiful, and that's how you can remember
Exactly.
her, and it's so much better.
Exactly. And the day before, my oldest sister and I actually went into the funeral home. I got them to bring her out on a slab covered in a white sheet, but on just cold on a slab, nothing done to her yet. And I'm like, here's new clothes, new jewelry, new shoes, new this, new that. This is how her hair is going to be. This is how her makeup's going to be. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning.
You're somebody who gets it done, eh? Well, I
Yes,
guess from a
I've
young
always
age,
been that
you've
way
had a lot of responsibility on you, right? So I
my
guess,
entire life.
yeah, so I guess
Yeah.
like through that, you've learned how to be somebody who gets things done.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
because like that is something I actually have a problem with sometimes with like anxiety. I don't
Yeah.
have that voice at times,
Yep.
but like you definitely do.
Yeah.
It definitely
And
is
now,
strong, but like very
yeah,
empathetic person.
I try. And now, like, I have a whole memorial table set up for her for the last almost 5 years now since she's been gone. I have my own
I
portion
have
of her
that too.
ashes. I try to get her story out. Like, I filmed for a documentary and it premiered last year. No, sorry, this year in the summer. For her story, the Hamilton Spectator. 6 months after she died, I was in the Spectator and other various forms of news media for Hamilton because of her story. So I want people to know and understand, like, exactly what you're trying to do here, but I can only speak, about my late mother.
Yeah,
But
well, like I that it's a very good way of showing how um trauma affects
yes,
like because I always say like addiction is just a way of coping and numbing yourself
yep,
from things that you haven't healed from, right? So
exactly.
she didn't know how to navigate certain things and
Yep,
it wasn't
she tried.
necessarily all her fault,
Yep,
and you were empathetic and understanding enough to like
yep,
keep her with you and still
yep,
love her for who she is, right?
exactly.
And
And it was a
that's
testament.
what is important because you
Oh yeah,
now you're older, you have those memories
yep,
instead of being somebody who was like, nope, don't want anything to do with you. And then she
yep,
passes and you don't have those memories, and and you live with
exactly.
regrets forever, right?
Exactly. And like, I don't have those regrets. And I thank God for that. And ever since, like, I love and miss her so much. And so many times I speak out and talk to her. And, I'm still grieving. I still cry. I miss her like terribly and I wish she was still here. Seeing my transition now, being part of my life like she wanted to be. If I ever got married, walk me down the aisle, be there,
That's why I
like,
won't get married. I won't get, I'm not actually
yeah,
married. I'm like common law because my
yeah,
dad can't walk me down the aisle, and I feel like
see?
I want to
Yeah,
belong to him forever, and I won't change my last name because
yeah,
he can't give me. And it's kind of like the same thing with your mom, like
yeah,
she can't be there, and you want to belong to her,
yeah,
because you're hers, and she's yours,
yeah.
right?
Exactly. And she gives me signs all the time. So, and she's here. She's here. Like I can
Oh
feel her.
yeah.
Yesterday, I was getting ready for a date actually I had, and I was getting ready in the bathroom, and I have a picture on it's like a Michelangelo painting. I have it on the bathroom wall, and out of nowhere, it just crashes down on the floor. It made me jump, right? And
Hmm.
I felt my mom's presence right then and there, and I was like, "Okay, mom, what do you want?" Like,
I do that.
it's not subtle.
There's this like little like we have a clock, and it
Yeah,
never makes noise except for when I swear to my dad it'll be like hello, and it's
yeah,
random, and I'm like, what do you want,
yep,
dad? Or he hides things in our house and then puts
yeah.
them back, like he does little things. I actually have a divination based business where I created a
Oh,
thing called induced death communication, where
yep,
you're able to talk to the person yourself,
yep,
and get like unanswered questions or guidance or messages from them and
right,
stuff like that. And because there was a lot of shady things that happened around my dad's death because my
yeah.
aunt manipulated him when he wasn't all there,
Okay,
right? So
yep,
I
I got it.
wanted to know if some of the choices were made by him or were made by her, and mediums couldn't figure them out. So because I'd practiced this for so long, I figured out how to get these answers
Yeah.
because I didn't want to resent my dad,
Oh,
because it was
absolutely.
because of the situation. So, and I intuitively knew it was my aunt, but I just had to know for sure. And
Yeah.
so that was able to give me closure. And like when I do it for other people, it's similar things like that, right?
Yeah.
Like you get what you need so that you can kind of move on from some of the things that you just don't know and you need to know,
Yeah.
right? And
Exactly.
like if you ever want me to do that reading for you, we
I
can,
might just ask you to be honest.
yeah, like we can set up a time to do
Sure.
that for sure. Um
And the one I just want to add too, the one good thing about my relationship with my mom, like, yeah, I ended up in foster care because of her. But like, and she was gone for like those 3.5 years. But like, in the end, I didn't end up resenting her in the end for it. I didn't, use that as a weapon against her in the end. And I accepted that. And I accepted the reality and the gravity of the situation. And I still loved her and I was still there for her. And she was there as much as she could be there for me, giving her addiction, infliction, and the limitations. And people in my family, especially my siblings, my mom's side of the family, doesn't understand how I could be like that when they absolutely despise her. They literally did. Like even my oldest sister, my brother, my other older sisters, they all hated her with
they
so
don't
much passion,
understand addiction,
and I never
right?
did.
Where for some reason you
Yeah,
were able to understand addiction
yeah,
at a young age, right? Where they just didn't understand. So they just
and
took
they
it
still don't.
as negative experiences and trauma
Yeah,
and not understanding
right.
why, right?
And then some of my siblings actually have their own drug addictions or alcohol
Well, I
addictions,
was
and
gonna
they
say I'm
still don't get it.
surprised. I am surprised that you were able to stay non-addicted through all of that because like even just going into foster care creates
Yeah.
a lot of people having
I
addiction
avoided
after.
because I was always fighting and protecting doing this, doing that. And like I was able to avoid and I was trying to stay so many extracurriculars on top of that as well to keep me out of the foster and group home as much as possible. It's like air cadets, martial arts, triple threat programs of singing, acting and dancing at a professional studio, horseback riding, summer camps, you name it. I did everything I could, right? And I was able to avoid a lot of the cracks. And my mom always said that if I ever start getting using drugs and get addicted to drugs, she would go to jail. And I looked at her, I was like, why? She's like, you're the only kid of mine that's not using drugs or abusing drugs and not anywhere near that. And I want it to stay that way. So if I see you doing what your siblings have been doing, or what, especially what I've been doing, I'm going to kill you. I was like, what? She's like, no, I'm gone. You're not. That's not your life. She's like, you're educated. You have a life. You're the most successful kid I ever had. You're the only one I have because of you. I can't. I'm here,
hmm
and you may go through your own issues, your own struggles with domestic violence and homelessness because of domestic violence and this and this. But she's like, you're strong, and you're here, and you're gonna have a bright future one day. She's like, I will kill you if you do exactly what I did.
Well, I get that from you. Like you speak very well. You speak like, and I don't mean like well as in like you're a good public speaker. I mean you speak
Right.
well about what you're talking about.
Oh
You're
yeah.
very like not like I can't even think of the word. Like you're very like as I said empathetic, but like
Yeah.
you don't like I can feel like you don't have that gene in you that makes you like
Well,
want to
my mom
numb
had that
yourself
gene.
out.
Yeah, my mom had that same gene that you're referring to from her dad. So she got it. I actually have it in a certain way. So after she died, I actually had a small, medium-sized drinking problem because of the grief and the pressure, and I was also
Yeah.
getting abused and by various family members in so many different ways. They took the hatred of mom out on me because I was the closest thing to her, and she was dead.
I
So
went through that too, so I get it.
so there were right. So there were a few years, a couple years, or what have you, where I struggled with alcohol. But in the end, I pulled myself eventually out of that, got the help I needed mentally, the alcohol addiction, turned it all around. Where now I'm back to how I used to be with alcohol before my mom died, which is I can go out with friends to a club or a house or to their house or on vacation, have a few drinks, get buzzed, get drunk or whatnot, but the next day or the same night, whatever, everything's fine. I'm fine. I'm not stupid.
Yeah,
I didn't do this, didn't do that. The only thing I have that's negative is a hangover. So I'm
yeah,
finally back at
I
that
feel that
part of myself.
too. I feel that exact same thing too, where like
Yeah.
before I would binge drink for
Yeah.
days and then sleep for
Yep.
days, and it was this horrible cycle. And it was just
Yep.
because I didn't want to, I just wanted to be numb. So I just kept
Yeah.
going and going and going. But now I can't like I get basically I don't even really like the taste of it. So,
Yeah.
I get a little bit buzzed, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I'm like I don't want to feel the hangovers that I have in the past
Yeah.
where I'm throwing up from the to the
Well,
point where I lose my
yeah.
voice, you know what I mean? Or drinking in the morning and just to
Yeah.
keep going so I don't get sick. Like
Yep.
I don't do that anymore and I don't
Yep.
want to, right? So I get to a
Yeah.
point where I've had about 4 or 5 and I'm like, okay, I think I'm done. I can't have any more because I don't want
Yeah.
to be that sick. And that's like my
Yeah.
tipping point. I don't want to get to the tipping point because
Exactly.
of all the drama that ensues with it,
Exactly.
right?
Right. And I did a lot of shadow work and work on myself. And now, like,
Shadow
I'm back
work.
at that.
Thank God somebody mentioned that because
Blessed be
I
me.
try to
That's
teach
me.
shadow work and people don't
Good.
understand it. But I'm not a 12. I don't like AA, right? So
Yeah.
I do shadow work instead because I don't like AA, right? I feel
Exactly.
like it's going to high school all over again. And that's just my feelings, right? So
Exactly.
I do shadow work and I found it
Yep.
through like doing divination and talking to different people. And I find it so helpful. The fact that you mentioned that, I'm like, yes, somebody else knows what that is and
Yes.
understands how
I'm
much it
Wiccan.
helps.
I'm Wiccan. My mom was Wiccan. Oh, yeah. You're in good company.
Oh, well, yeah, I'll do, I will definitely do reading for you. I'll talk to you about it
Sure.
after. But do you have anything
Sure.
else to say before I let you go?
Yeah, it's like when it comes to addiction and affliction and the people that are abusing or the people that are affected by it, it's not as black and white as it may seem, as you can tell, by this episode, my late mother and my story with her and her story there. Um, there's a lot of contributing factors. There's a lot of backstory, a lot of underlining issues. It's not as black and white, and it's not best practice to try to demonize them and cast them out and, just throw them away like they're nothing. They're human beings who are struggling, who are in pain, who are traumatized, who are, there are so many different reasons and ways and we need to be able to help them. Whether it's personal help or professional help, we need to help them and not cast them away like that, and not hate them and demonize them. Um, I wish my mom had more of people like me around her, especially within the family. Um, but unfortunately, she didn't. So maybe one day with other people that changes, and I hope the one takeaway that a person can get from this episode here is to learn something from my mom's story. Whatever that something may be is depends on the individual. But I hope you learn something positive out of this and can use it in dealing with addicts or those who have been affected by addicts.
Well, I love what you said because that's like kind of what I'm trying to do is when you see somebody that's homeless on the street, you think, oh,
Yeah.
they're just a scum, right? A scumbag or
Yep.
whatever. When really they have a story, they have more to them, and
Yep.
to not treat them or see them as negative people. And I love that you said that because that's exactly what I'm trying to portray through
Yeah.
doing this, right? So
And you're doing valuable work, and I commend you, and I thank you so much for doing this.
well, I thank you so much for sharing that story. There's so much to it, and there's so much people can learn from it that, like, I don't even know where to start because there's so much that it's so valuable in so many
Right.
ways, right? So, thank you so much for coming on. I might have you come back because
Sure.
there might be some more I want to ask you.
That's fair. Hey, I'm here.
Well, thank you for coming on. And
Thanks for having
yeah,
me.
it was nice meeting you, and I'll have this episode uploaded in a couple days, okay?
Thanks, and appreciate you having me on. And it was lovely to connect and have a conversation with you too, Jasmine.
Well, thank you and have a nice rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.